me as I explore some abandoned ghost towns and uncover the secrets hiding within their forgotten walls. Abandoned ghost towns have always held a certain mystique, a mysterious allure that draws us in and makes us wonder what stories they might tell. From crumbling buildings to rusted machinery, every aspect of these forgotten places seems to whisper tales of the past. Uncovering the secrets of these abandoned towns can be a challenge, to say it mildly. Many of these places are inaccessible, hidden deep in the wilderness or protected by treacherous terrain. Others are simply too dangerous, plagued by toxic chemicals, crumbling structures, or even wild animals. And yet, the allure of discovery remains strong, drawing adventurers and explorers in with promises of hidden treasures and untold riches. Despite the dangers, many are willing to take the risk, driven by a sense of curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. It's a delicate balance, one that requires a mix of caution and bravery. As we venture into these abandoned places, we begin to realize that every step holds a surprise, every corner a potential danger. It's a cat and mouse game where the unknown lurks around every bend, waiting to pounce. And yet, it's this very uncertainty that drives us forward, that makes us want to explore every nook and cranny to uncover every hidden secret. The thrill of discovery is addictive, a siren's call that draws us deeper into the heart of these abandoned towns. But what is it about these places that holds us so spellbound? Is it the whispers of the past, the echoes of lives long forgotten? Or is it something more, something fundamental to our nature as human beings? Whatever the reason, one thing is certain: abandoned ghost towns hold a power over us, a power that cannot be denied. Welcome to Bodie, California, a ghost town that's been abandoned since the 1940s. This place is a treasure trove of history, a time capsule frozen in the early 20th century. From the old general store to the abandoned mine, every building seems to hold a story, every artifact a secret. As we walk the dusty streets, it's easy to imagine the lives of those who once called Bodie home. The miners, the merchants, the families who lived and laughed and loved here. Next, we have Pripyat, Ukraine, a town that was abandoned almost overnight after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. This place is a haunting reminder of the power of nature, of the devastating consequences of human error. From the crumbling hospital to the rusting Ferris wheel, every aspect of Pripyat seems to whisper tales of tragedy and loss. And yet, even in the midst of such devastation, there's a strange beauty to this place, a beauty that's both haunting and humbling. In Centralia, Pennsylvania, we find a town that's been on fire since the 1960s. A slow-burning coal seam that's gradually consuming the town from beneath. It's a surreal landscape, a world straight out of science fiction. Cracked streets, burning hillsides, and an air thick with the smell of smoke and ash. And yet, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, there's a strange allure to this place. A place that's both beautiful and terrifying. But Bodie, Pripyat, and Centralia are just a few examples of the many ghost towns that dot our landscape. From the abandoned mining towns of the American West to the crumbling cities of the European East, there are countless stories waiting to be uncovered, countless secrets waiting to be revealed. Was exploring an abandoned asylum in rural Ohio when I stumbled upon something that would change my perspective on these ghost towns forever. It was an old patient's journal tucked away in a dusty closet, its pages yellowed with age. As I flipped through the pages, I began to realize that this wasn't just a diary. It was a window into the soul of a forgotten individual, a person who'd lived and laughed and loved in this very place. It was a powerful reminder that these ghost towns aren't just empty buildings and crumbling streets. They're the custodians of human history, the keepers of our collective past. Abandoned ghost towns hold a special place in our collective imagination, a place where mystery and intrigue reign supreme. They're a window into our past, a reminder of the triumphs and tragedies that have shaped us into who we are today. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the world of abandoned ghost towns. If you've got a favorite ghost town or a personal experience you'd like to share, be sure to comment below, and don't forget to check out my next video for more adventures and discoveries.
Part 1. The town of Hollow Creek sat forgotten, deep in the mountains where no highway ran and no train ever whistled by. It had been abandoned for nearly a century, a relic from the days when coal was king and the veins beneath the earth bled black gold. The town was a ghost, decaying in the forest like the bones of a forgotten animal, and it had been left to rot after the last mine shaft collapsed, burying 30 men alive. We'd heard about the town from an old prospector we'd met while camping a few years back. He spoke about Hollow Creek as if it were still alive, warning us with the conviction of a man who'd seen too much. He said the town was cursed, a place where things lingered, things that shouldn't be remembered. His eyes had a haunted look as he whispered about screams carried on the wind and lights flickering in houses that should have been abandoned long ago. We'd laughed it off at the time. Who believes in ghost stories anymore? But here I was, standing on the outskirts of that same ghost town, my breath coming out in quick, anxious puffs in the crisp autumn air. I had always been drawn to these abandoned places, fascinated by the way time seemed to stand still, as if the people had just stepped out for a moment and never returned. My girlfriend, Sarah, and two of our friends, Jake and Emily, had come along for the adventure. We were explorers, scavengers of the past, eager to uncover the secrets of a forgotten world. From a distance, Hollow Creek was unsettling. Its silhouette stood out against the sky like a jagged scar. The church steeple, still remarkably intact, pointed accusingly at the heavens, while the rest of the building sagged under the weight of years. The wind howled through the hollow windows, as if the town itself was breathing. "Looks like nobody's home," Jake muttered, kicking at the ground as we stood at the town's entrance. "Would have been weirder if someone was," Sarah replied, adjusting her backpack. "Let's head in." We walked through the main street, our footsteps the only sound apart from the occasional creak of wood and the rustle of dead leaves. It felt like we were intruders in a place that had never wanted visitors. As we moved deeper into the town, a strange sensation crept over me, something I couldn't quite place. It was as if the town was watching us, the empty windows like eyes tracking our every move. "I don't like this," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She was usually the brave one, but today, even she seemed on edge. "Come on," I said, trying to shake off the feeling. "It's just an old mining town. Nothing here but dust and history." But even as I said the words, I felt the lie in them. Hollow Creek wasn't like the other places we'd explored. There was something wrong here, something deeper than just the decay of time. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the shadows seemed darker, heavier, as if they held secrets too terrible to be revealed. We split up to explore, agreeing to meet back at the church in an hour. Sarah and I headed toward the old schoolhouse while Jake and Emily veered off to the blacksmith's shop. The schoolhouse door creaked loudly as I pushed it open, revealing a classroom frozen in time. Desks sat in neat rows, as if the children had just been dismissed for the day. Dust hung in the air like fine powder, and the blackboard still bore the faint chalk outline of a long-forgotten lesson. Sarah ran her fingers across one of the desks, her face thoughtful. "Imagine what it was like, growing up here," she said softly. "Cut off from the rest of the world." I didn't answer. My attention was drawn to something in the corner of the room, something I hadn't noticed at first. A small figure, standing in the shadows. My heart leapt into my throat. It was a doll, propped up against the wall, its eyes staring blankly at me. Its dress was tattered, covered in a thick layer of dust, but its face was disturbingly pristine. It almost looked new. I bent down to get a closer look, a chill running down my spine. Dolls were common in old towns like this, leftovers from children long gone. But this one felt wrong. I could have sworn its eyes had been turned toward the wall when we first entered the room. "Creepy," Sarah said, standing behind me. "Come on, let's check out the mine entrance." I stood up, reluctant to turn my back on the doll. Something about it set my nerves on edge, but I couldn't pinpoint why. Shaking it off, I followed Sarah out of the schoolhouse, the feeling of being watched growing stronger with each step. The mine entrance loomed at the edge of the town, a black gash in the earth. A rusted iron gate stood partially open, and beyond it, a yawning darkness beckoned. We'd come to explore the town, but the mine, it was the heart of Hollow Creek's story. It was where everything had ended. "I don't know about this," I muttered, staring into the blackness. Scared? Sarah teased, though her voice held a nervous edge. Just cautious, I replied, stepping closer to the entrance. The air was colder here, and it carried a faint, metallic smell that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Sarah grabbed my hand, pulling me forward. Come on. We didn't come all this way to chicken out. Reluctantly, I followed her into the mine, our footsteps echoing unnaturally in the confined space. The light from our flashlights bounced off the walls, revealing jagged rocks and rotting timbers. The deeper we went, the more the air seemed to press in around us, thick and suffocating. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but Sarah pushed forward, her curiosity stronger than her fear. Just as I was about to suggest we head back, there was a sudden, sharp crack from above. Before I could react, the ceiling gave way, and the world around me exploded into chaos. Part 2. I hit the ground hard, the air knocked out of me as debris rained down. Dust and jagged rocks pelted my back, and for a moment, all I could do was lie there, gasping, trying to process what had just happened. The ceiling had collapsed. Panic surged through me, my heart pounding wildly as I rolled onto my side, coughing, spitting dirt from my mouth. Sarah? I croaked, my voice barely audible over the ringing in my ears. There was no response. I struggled to my feet, the darkness around me oppressive, my flashlight nowhere to be found. The small beam of light we had been following was gone, swallowed by the cave-in. The thick cloud of dust made it hard to breathe, my chest heaving with every shallow breath. Sarah! I shouted, louder this time, hoping, praying, for some kind of answer. But the only sound was the unsettling drip of water from deep within the mine. My hands fumbled for my phone, its dim screen casting a weak glow. I shone it around, but all I could see were piles of rocks and twisted wood, remnants of the old mine shaft that had been shaken loose. I hadn't even realized how deep we had ventured. Now, standing alone in the darkness, it felt like the walls were closing in. Then, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic scraping sound, like something dragging itself across the dirt floor. I froze, the hair on my arm standing on end. The sound was coming from deeper in the mine, past the collapse, from a place I knew no one should be. My throat tightened as the sound grew closer, a steady, unnatural movement that echoed unnervingly off the walls. Sarah? I whispered, my voice trembling, though I knew it wasn't her. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I turned back toward the direction of the entrance, my body tense, ready to bolt, but the way we'd come was blocked, completely sealed by debris. Fear clawed at my chest. There was no way out. I was trapped. And whatever was making that sound was getting closer. In the weak glow of my phone, I spotted Sarah's flashlight on the ground, half buried under rubble. I grabbed it, my hands shaking as I switched it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing more of the collapsed tunnel, the jagged rocks casting eerie shadows. But there was no sign of Sarah. The scraping sound stopped. A heavy silence fell over the mine, thicker than before. My breath caught in my throat as I stood there, holding the flashlight like a lifeline, straining to listen. The air had gone cold, unnaturally cold, and the metallic scent that had lingered at the entrance was now overwhelming, thick with the unmistakable tang of blood. Then, a voice, soft, broken, whispered from the shadows ahead. "Help, me." It was Sarah's voice, but it wasn't right. It was distorted, twisted, as if she was speaking through a broken radio. My stomach dropped, the cold settling into my bones. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of there, but there was nowhere to go. I was trapped. And she was still out there. Or whatever was left of her. "Sarah?" I called, my voice shaking. "Where are you?" The beam of my flashlight wavered as I took a step forward, deeper into the mine. I didn't want to go further, but the sound of her voice, it tugged at me. The fear of leaving her behind was stronger than my fear of what lay ahead. "Please, help me," the voice repeated, closer now. I shone the flashlight in the direction of the sound, my heart thundering in my chest. For a moment, I saw nothing but darkness, the beam swallowed by the thick shadows. But then, something shifted in the far corner of the mine. My breath caught in my throat as I saw her. Sarah was standing there, her back to me, her body eerily still. Her clothes were covered in dirt, her hair hanging in front of her face like a curtain. She wasn't moving, just standing there, frozen like a mannequin. "Sarah?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She didn't respond. I took a hesitant step toward her, my flashlight shaking in my hand. Something was wrong. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stay back, but I forced myself to move closer. I had to get her out of here. Whatever had happened, I couldn't leave her behind. "Sarah, come on," I said, my voice trembling. "We have to go." She didn't move. I was only a few feet away now, the flashlight casting long, unnatural shadows across her form. Her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible, but there was something wrong with the way her body was positioned. It was too rigid, too unnatural. And then I saw it. Her hands, they weren't her hands. Where her fingers should have been, there were long, jagged bones, sharp and pointed like claws. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her arms hung at an unnatural angle, twisted and contorted as if the bones inside had been broken and reshaped. I stumbled back, a gasp escaping my throat. "Sarah!" I shouted, panic surging through me. She turned slowly, her movements stiff, mechanical, and when I saw her face, my blood ran cold. It wasn't Sarah. The thing wearing her face stared back at me with hollow, empty eyes, its mouth twisted into a grotesque smile that stretched far too wide. Its skin was pulled tight over its skull, and its lips parted to reveal rows of jagged, sharp teeth. "Help me," it whispered again, the voice coming from somewhere deep inside its throat, not from its mouth. I froze, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the terror in my chest was all too real, suffocating me, holding me in place as the thing took a step forward. I turned and ran. My feet pounded against the ground as I sprinted back toward the entrance, my heart slamming in my chest. The flashlight flickered in my hand as I dodged the debris, the air growing colder with every step. Behind me, I could hear it. The scraping sound, faster now, closer. And the voice, Sarah's voice, warped and broken, calling after me. "Don't leave me." I didn't look back. I couldn't. My only thought was to get out, to escape the nightmare that had become Hollow Creek. But with every step, the mine seemed to close in around me, the walls growing narrower, the ceiling lower. The way out was blocked, the entrance buried under tons of rock and dirt. There was no escape. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way, and I fell, tumbling down a steep incline into the darkness below. The flashlight flew from my hand, the world spinning as I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. I lay there, dazed, the darkness pressing in from all sides. The scraping sound had stopped. The voice had gone silent. For a moment, I thought I was alone. But then, from the darkness above, I heard the soft, slow sound of footsteps. Descending. Part 3. I lay on the cold, damp ground, my body aching from the fall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mind raced, a whirlwind of panic and confusion, as the echo of those footsteps grew closer. They were deliberate, slow, as if whatever was coming down toward me knew exactly where I was. It was toying with me, savoring the fear that radiated off me like heat. The flashlight was gone, its beam snuffed out in the fall. I fumbled for my phone, but when I pulled it out, the screen was cracked, flickering dimly before going dark. I was plunged into complete blackness, the air thick and suffocating. I couldn't see anything, not the walls of the tunnel, not even my own hands. The darkness was alive, breathing, pressing down on me like a weight. The footsteps stopped. I strained to listen, my breath shallow and ragged. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. But then, faintly, I heard it again. The scraping. Closer now, as if it were just behind me. My pulse quickened, my skin crawling with the realization that I wasn't alone. Sarah. I whispered, my voice trembling, though I knew whatever this thing was, it wasn't her. I don't know why I said it, maybe out of desperation, hoping some part of her still lingered beneath the horror I had seen. But there was no response. Instead, the silence deepened, thick and impenetrable. The cold in the air intensified, chilling me to my bones, and the scent of decay grew stronger, metallic and sharp. I wasn't sure how long I lay there, frozen in place, waiting for whatever was coming to make its move. And then I heard it. Not a sound, exactly, but a presence, an unmistakable shift in the air, like something massive had moved. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and instinctively, I pressed myself closer to the ground, every muscle in my body tensed. A whisper, barely audible, floated through the darkness. "Stay." It was Sarah's voice again, but more broken this time, almost a moan. It was coming from all around me, as if the darkness itself was speaking. The cold deepened, and I felt an icy breath against my skin, so close that I could almost feel something brushing my cheek. My mind screamed at me to move, to do anything, but my body refused to respond, paralyzed by the primal terror that surged through me. Then, suddenly, there was light. Dim at first, like a faint glow coming from deep within the earth. I turned my head slowly, squinting through the haze, and saw it, a pale, flickering light emanating from the depths of the mine, casting long shadows that danced eerily against the jagged walls. The light flickered again, growing stronger, and as it did, I saw them. Figures. At first, I thought they were people, men, maybe, from the mining days. But as the light brightened, the truth became clearer, and my stomach twisted in horror. They weren't men. The figures shuffled forward, emerging from the shadows, their bodies hunched and twisted, their faces obscured by ragged cloth and dirt-caked skin. They moved slowly, unnaturally, like puppets on strings, their limbs jerking with every step. Their clothes, tattered, filthy remnants of the past, hung loosely from their bodies, and their faces were wrong. Twisted, hollow, eyes sunken deep into blackened sockets, staring but not seeing. The miners. The ones who had been buried alive. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. My body was shaking uncontrollably now, every nerve screaming in terror as the figures moved closer, their eyes fixed on me with a dead, glassy stare. They were silent, but the scraping sound echoed with each step, like bones dragging across the stone. I scrambled to my feet, my heart slamming in my chest. I had to get out. I had to run. But as I backed away, something cold and slimy brushed against my arm. I spun around, my flashlight beam darting frantically through the dark, and there it was, Sarah. Or what was left of her. She was hunched over, her body twitching as if it was being manipulated by invisible strings. Her head jerked up, and our eyes met, empty, hollow eyes, filled with something that wasn't her. "Please, stay." She rasped, her voice barely human, her mouth stretching into that grotesque smile again. The world spun around me, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. It wasn't Sarah. It couldn't be. But the way she moved, the way her body seemed to twist and break with every step, it was as if the mine itself had claimed her, reshaping her into something monstrous. Behind her, the figures loomed closer, their hollow eyes locked on me. There was no escape. No way out. I was trapped, surrounded by the ghosts of Hollow Creek, and something far worse than death awaited me in the darkness. Run! The word exploded from my throat before I could stop myself, my body finally responding to the raw, primal fear surging through me. I turned and bolted, my feet pounding against the dirt and stone as I raced back the way I had come. I could hear them behind me, shuffling, dragging, their breath rasping through the silence like a death rattle. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. Every part of me knew that if I turned around, if I saw what was coming, would never be able to stop running. But the tunnel was closing in, the walls narrowing with every step, and soon, the darkness ahead was absolute. My heart raced, panic threatening to consume me, but I kept running, hoping, praying, that there was a way out. That somehow, I could escape whatever hell I had stumbled into. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted, and I stumbled, my legs buckling. I hit the ground hard, the flashlight slipping from my grasp and skittering across the floor. The beam flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls as I crawled forward, desperately reaching for it. And then, the beam caught something. It was a figure, different from the others. It was standing in the far corner of the tunnel, almost hidden in the shadows, its back to me. At first, I thought it was just another one of the miners. But as the light flickered, I saw its outline more clearly. It wasn't like the others. This figure was taller, its body more defined, like a man, but there was something wrong with the way it stood. Its posture was rigid, too straight, too still, as if it were waiting. Watching. And then it moved. A slow, deliberate turn, its face coming into view. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a man. Its skin was a sickly gray, stretched thin over sharp, angular bones. Its eyes were wide and black, too large for its face, and its mouth was impossibly wide, a dark, gaping maw that seemed to stretch endlessly. It grinned at me, its teeth jagged and sharp, glistening in the faint light. And then it spoke. "Come, closer." The voice was like nails on glass, a twisted mockery of speech that sent a shudder down my spine. I scrambled backward, away from the thing, my mind screaming at me to get up, to run, to do anything to escape. But I couldn't move. The creature took a step forward, its grin widening, the blackness in its eyes seeming to swallow the light around it. "Closer!" I screamed. Part 4. My scream echoed through the mine, bouncing off the jagged walls and disappearing into the infinite darkness. But the creature didn't flinch. It just kept grinning, that grotesque, unnatural smile widening as it took another step toward me. Its movements were deliberate, unhurried, like it knew there was no point in rushing. I was trapped, and it had all the time in the world. "Closer," it whispered again, that voice like shattered glass scraping against my ears. I scrambled backward, my hands scraping against the rough stone as I tried to put distance between me and the thing. My flashlight had rolled a few feet away, its dim beam flickering weakly. My heart hammered in my chest, my mind racing with a singular, desperate thought: I need to get out. But there was no way out. The mine was collapsing around me, the walls tightening like a noose. Behind the creature, the figures of the miners were still advancing, their hollow eyes fixed on me, their twisted bodies moving in jerking, unnatural motions. And then, from the shadows behind the creature, another figure emerged. It was Sarah, or what used to be her. She moved with that same grotesque stiffness, her limbs contorted in ways that defied anatomy. Her face was pale, drained of color, her eyes hollow and lifeless. And yet, there was something worse in her gaze now, a hunger, a desperate, gnawing emptiness that chilled me to my core. "Stay," she whispered, her voice broken and distorted, as if it was being dragged out of her throat against her will. I clamped a hand over my mouth, stifling a sob as the tears welled up in my eyes. This wasn't Sarah. It couldn't be. But some part of her must have still been there, trapped in that twisted, rotting shell. I wanted to reach out to her, to pull her away from whatever nightmare had taken her, but I knew that wasn't possible. "Please," she whispered again, her voice barely audible, her body twitching as she took another step toward me. "Stay with me." The thing in front of her, the creature with the wide, black eyes and the endless grin, shifted its gaze toward her, its head tilting at an unnatural angle as it watched her approach. It was like it was amused, as if Sarah's broken, desperate form was somehow entertaining. Then it spoke, its voice a low, guttural rasp. "She's waiting." I don't know why, but those words pierced me with a terror deeper than anything I had felt up until that point. They weren't meant for me, they were for Sarah. It was commanding her, drawing her closer, pulling her deeper into whatever twisted game this was. And she was powerless to stop it. I had to move. I had to run. Without thinking, I lunged for the flashlight, my hand shaking as I grabbed it. The beam flickered, sputtering in and out, but it was enough to see the tunnel stretching out behind me. I stumbled to my feet, my legs weak and trembling, and turned to run. "Don't," the creature hissed, its voice slicing through the air like a blade. I didn't look back. My feet pounded against the dirt floor as I bolted down the tunnel, the sound of scraping and shuffling growing louder behind me. The walls were closing in, the ceiling lower with every step, but I didn't care. I had to get out. I had to survive. The tunnel twisted and turned, the darkness swallowing me whole as the flashlight flickered weakly in my hand. Every breath was ragged, burning my lungs as I pushed myself harder, faster. I could still hear them, those things, behind me, their footsteps echoing in the blackness, their voices whispering my name. "Stay with us. Join us." The voices were everywhere, surrounding me, wrapping around my mind like a suffocating fog. I fought against it, forcing myself to focus, to keep moving forward, but the tunnel was endless, twisting in on itself like a labyrinth. There was no escape. I could feel it, an overwhelming sense of doom pressing down on me, crushing me. And then, I saw it. A faint glimmer of light ahead, so small I almost missed it. It was barely a pinprick in the distance, but it was there, a way out. I ran faster, my legs burning, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The light grew brighter with every step, the walls of the tunnel widening as I got closer. It was real. The exit was real. I could feel the fresh air, cool and crisp, beckoning me forward. But just as I was about to reach it, something grabbed my ankle. I screamed, my body slamming into the ground as I was yanked backward. Pain shot through my leg, my head spinning from the impact. My flashlight flew from my hand, clattering across the stone floor and plunging me into near-total darkness. I kicked wildly, my heart racing as I tried to free myself from whatever had hold of me. My hands clawed at the dirt, desperate to pull myself forward, but the grip on my ankle tightened, dragging me back into the shadows. "No!" I screamed, thrashing against the invisible force. "Let me go." But the thing didn't let go. It only pulled harder, dragging me further from the light, back into the black, suffocating void. And then, in the dim glow of the flashlight, I saw it. Sarah's face. She was the one pulling me. Her mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile, her eyes wide and empty, like a marionette with its strings pulled too tight. Her fingers, those broken, twisted fingers, dug into my leg, dragging me toward her, her breath shallow and rasping. "Don't leave," she whispered, her voice a mockery of the girl I had known. "Don't leave me alone." I kicked at her with all the strength I had left, panic surging through me as I fought to break free. Her grip was iron, unyielding, her eyes locked on mine with a desperation that made my skin crawl. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the flashlight beam flicker, casting light across the tunnel once more. And in that moment, I saw it. The creature, the thing that had been hunting me, was standing at the far end of the tunnel, its wide, black eyes gleaming in the darkness. It watched us with that same sickening grin, its teeth glistening as it took one slow, deliberate step forward. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was trapped, caught between the two monsters, and there was no escape. But then, without warning, Sarah's grip loosened. Her face twisted in pain, her body convulsing as she let out a guttural, choking gasp. Her fingers slipped from my leg, and for a brief, fleeting moment, her eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, met mine. "Run," she whispered, her voice weak, broken. "Run, now." I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain in my leg, and sprinted toward the light. The creature let out a low, growling hiss behind me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. All I could think about was the exit, the safety that waited just beyond the tunnel. The light grew brighter, the air fresher, and then, with one final, desperate push, I burst out of the mine. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, my heart racing as I stared up at the darkening sky. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape, but I was out. I was free. For a long moment, I just lay there, unable to move, unable to think. The cold wind whipped across my skin, but it was a welcome sensation, a reminder that I was alive. That I had made it. But Sarah, she hadn't. I sat up slowly, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear, and stared back at the entrance to the mine. The black, gaping hole stood silent, unmoving, as if it had swallowed the horrors within and left no trace. But I knew better. The town of Hollow Creek had taken her, just as it had taken the others. And there was nothing I could do to change that. With a deep, shuddering breath, I turned away from the mine, knowing I could never return. But as I stood up, ready to leave the town behind, I heard it again. A soft whisper, carried on the wind. "Come back." Part 5. I froze. The whisper, faint but unmistakable, drifted on the wind like a distant echo. My heart, which had begun to slow, started pounding all over again. I didn't want to believe it, didn't want to acknowledge the pull that Hollow Creek still had on me, but the voice, Sarah's voice was clear. "Come back." I stood there, staring at the mine entrance, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The setting sun cast long, jagged shadows over the ground, stretching toward the black maw of the mine as if the earth itself was trying to drag me back. My mind screamed at me to leave, to get as far away from this cursed place as possible, but I couldn't move. I could still feel her, Sarah somewhere in that mine. Maybe it wasn't really her, not anymore. Maybe she was gone, consumed by whatever dark force had taken her. But there was a part of me that couldn't let go, that couldn't accept that she was truly lost. I turned, my legs weak and trembling, and took a step toward the mine entrance. "Sarah?" I called, my voice small and shaky. The wind carried the sound away, and there was no response. Just the oppressive silence of Hollow Creek, waiting. A flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned quickly, my breath catching in my throat, but it was just the rustle of dead leaves in the fading light. Still, it felt as if something was watching me, hidden just beyond the edge of my vision. I took another step, and then another, until I was standing at the entrance to the mine once again. The gaping darkness seemed to pulse, as if the mine was breathing, drawing me in with every exhale. My hand trembled as I reached for the flashlight still clutched in my pocket. "Don't do it." Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and run, but I couldn't. I had to know if there was any part of Sarah left. I had to know if she was still in there, waiting. With a deep breath, I flicked on the flashlight and stepped inside. The air inside the mine was colder now, much colder than before, and the metallic tang of blood and decay hit me like a wall. I fought the urge to gag, pressing forward, my footsteps echoing eerily off the stone walls. The tunnel seemed narrower than I remembered, the walls pressing in from all sides, suffocating me. The flashlight beam flickered, casting long shadows that danced and twisted in the periphery of my vision. I could hear the faint sound of my breathing, ragged and shallow, but beneath that, there was something else. A soft scraping, like fingernails dragging across stone. And then, there it was again. Come back. The whisper was louder this time, clearer. It was Sarah, but it wasn't right. The tone was wrong, distorted, like a voice heard underwater. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved deeper into the mine, the flashlight beam struggling to pierce the thick darkness ahead. The mine twisted and turned, the narrow passages winding deeper into the earth, and with each step, the sense of dread grew stronger. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and the air was thick with an unseen presence that pressed against my skin, cold and suffocating. And then I saw it. In the distance, just beyond the reach of my flashlight, there was a faint, flickering light. It was the same eerie glow I had seen before, that ghostly illumination that had revealed the twisted, broken forms of the miners. My breath hitched in my throat as I realized that I was back where I had been before, the heart of the mine. The place where everything had gone wrong. And standing in the center of the tunnel, illuminated by that pale, flickering light, was Sarah. She was facing away from me, her body hunched and twisted just as I had seen her before. Her hair hung in front of her face like a curtain, and her arms hung limply at her sides, her fingers still grotesquely deformed into those jagged, bone-like claws. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice trembling as I took a step closer. The sound of my voice seemed to snap something in her, and she twitched, her body jerking unnaturally, as if something was controlling her movements. "Come back," she whispered again, her voice breaking, as if she were struggling to speak. It wasn't her. I knew it wasn't her, but some part of me still held on to the hope that I could bring her back. That I could save her. I took another step forward, the flashlight beam flickering as I approached. The glow from the strange light behind her cast long, eerie shadows across the walls, distorting the space around us. "Sarah, please," I whispered. "Come with me. We can get out of here. We can." Before I could finish, she turned. Her face, it wasn't human anymore. Her eyes were black, hollow voids, and her mouth was stretched into that horrible, too-wide grin, exposing rows of jagged, sharp teeth. Her skin was pale and stretched tight over her skull, and as she took a step toward me, her body twisted and cracked with every movement. "Stay with me," she rasped, her voice a grotesque parody of the girl I had loved. "Don't leave." I stumbled backward, the flashlight slipping from my hand as I tripped over the uneven ground. My heart raced as I scrambled to my feet, but it was too late. She was moving toward me now, her body jerking and twisting with every step, her hollow eyes locked on mine. "Stay," she hissed, her voice growing louder, more distorted. "Don't leave me." I turned to run, but the tunnel behind me was gone. The walls had closed in, sealing me in with her, trapping me in the heart of Hollow Creek. There was no way out. The light, the exit, was gone. And then I felt it. A cold, skeletal hand on my shoulder. I whipped around, my breath catching in my throat, but there was no one there. Just the empty, yawning darkness. But the hand, ****, I had felt it ****. It had been real as the cold sweat running down my spine. The shadows shifted, moving like living things, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. The miners. Dozens of them, their twisted, broken forms creeping out of the darkness, their eyes glowing faintly in the pale light. Their bodies moved in jerking, unnatural motions, just like Sarah's, and their hollow eyes were fixed on me. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to pulse with every breath. I could feel it, whatever was down here, whatever had taken Sarah, it was hungry. And it was coming for me. I backed away, my mind racing for a way out, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were closing in, the shadows pressing down from all sides. I could hear Sarah behind me, her voice twisted and broken, calling my name in that awful, mocking tone. And then, from the depths of the mine, I heard it. A low, rumbling growl. The ground beneath me trembled, and the pale light flickered as something massive moved in the darkness. The shadows twisted, coiling around the walls, and from the far end of the tunnel, a shape emerged. It was huge, its body dark and hulking, barely visible in the faint light. But its eyes, those black, soulless eyes, gleamed in the darkness, and its mouth, lined with jagged teeth, opened wide. "Come back," it whispered, its voice deep and guttural, echoing through the mine. I backed away, my heart pounding, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The thing moved closer, its massive form filling the tunnel, blocking any chance of escape. I was trapped. But then, from somewhere deep inside me, a surge of adrenaline kicked in. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't let it take me. I had to fight. With a scream, I lunged for the flashlight, my fingers wrapping around the cold metal as I swung it toward the creature. The beam of light hit its eyes, and for a split second, the thing recoiled, its body shuddering as it let out a deafening roar. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran. The tunnel stretched out before me, the walls warping and twisting as the light flickered in my hand. I could hear the creature behind me, its growls echoing through the mine as it gave chase. But I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The tunnel opened up, and there it was, the exit. The faint glow of the outside world, distant but real. With one final burst of energy, I sprinted toward the light, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. The creature roared again, its footsteps shaking the ground beneath me, but I didn't stop. And then, with one final leap, I was out. The cold night air hit me like a wave, and I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. The entrance to the mine stood behind me, dark and silent, as if the nightmare had never existed. But I knew better. I had escaped Hollow Creek. But it, whatever it was still down there. And Sarah. Sarah was gone. As I lay there, staring up at the night sky, I heard it again. Faint, almost imperceptible. "Come back." But this time, I wouldn't listen. I had escaped the ghost town. But some part of me knew it wasn't finished with me yet. The end.